Hey everyone, I'm Stefan Marceau. Today on the Nano Cruising Podcast, we'll continue our stories with our rice. It's a pretty daring and crazy story. Maybe in time for Halloween, go in a dark place, the headphones on, turn off the lights, and listen to this. Also, do stay till the end as we have an important announcement. Thank you.
That was just the introduction.
Wow.
But I knew that.
Yeah.
That's what I came for, way to learn about myself and learn about what I prepared. So I managed to continue from there down the Magdalena Channel, and I had people following me through the InReach site, and some people who were following me later said, we couldn't figure why you were like anchored at one spot for 4 days or 5 days. Well, that's because I simply couldn't move.
Just couldn't move. The weather was so bad.
I experienced hundreds, and that's plural, hundreds of willy-wahs, the downdraft extreme winds. So I would just be in my boat. I lived on that boat for 62 days with 3 hours, approximately 3 hours off to pump water out of streams, to replenish.
Right.
And so, but I loved it. I miss it to this day.
Really? Wow.
And when I got into the Milky Way islands, where Slocum, by the way, I for the first time on that trip, I cracked open Sailing Alone Around the World. I'd saved it and was reading that as I sailed.
Oh, what a wonderful companion.
Yeah, Slocum got lost in the Milky Way and had quite an adventure finding his way. Well, I sailed into the Milky Way on a day. I turned to the east into what's called the Milky Way, the Southwest Islands, which was my goal, to explore the Southwest Islands. Getting there was a trip, but once I was there, it was another thing altogether. And it was a very strange day. It was blowing only about 5 knots of wind. So I always wore my dry suit and layers, and I peeled off my dry suit to my waist. And so I had my upper torso kind of drying out as I was just bubbling along downwind, foolishly. And because I should have known better. And all of a sudden, I heard the roar of, the next front coming. And I looked behind me, and there was this wild system of extreme winds. It blew in excess of 40 knots. They came upon me within 5 minutes. I didn't have time to get my dry suit back on.
Oh, no.
My boat was knocked down. And I sea trialed this boat in every circumstance I could think of. But one thing I didn't test was in that extreme condition of knocked on my starboard side, the main boom and the mizzen boom swung forward, and 2 fittings on the end of each of those booms accidentally connected.
Oh.
So my mizzen was facing forward, and my main was connected to it, and I had to dive into the water and grab those and disconnect those. The boat bobbed up, and I managed to get back on board and just blew downwind to a place that I thought was safe.
Right.
And that was a little horseshoe canyon with steep rock walls. The entrance was about 30 yards wide. And once I got in there, I thought I could find some ability to anchor. But the problem is, my anchor line at that time, I carried 4 anchors. My forward anchor had 150 feet of rode. So I paid it out, nothing. I dragged. Then I upped anchor and I moved within that little horseshoe, which was about 75 yards or so across. Anchored again. Couldn't hold. Anchored again. 13 times in the space of about 8 hours.
Wow.
I couldn't get an anchor down. And so at 2 a.m, I finally said to myself, I made some food and, got ready and said, I'm either a sailor or I'm not. I'm going to short tack out of here. It's a one-shot deal. If I miss it, I'm totally in trouble. And I managed to short tack out of that entrance. And then I got lost.
Like Slocum.
Now you wonder why I'm humble? Because I learn all the time.
That's all good.
Like Slocum, in a sense, I started trying to figure out where I was, because now I'm blowing along. The wind had abated to about 20 knots, but that's a handful. And so I was down to staysail, reef main, reef mizzen, charging along on a broad reach, trying to, navigate. And I said, I'm going to pull in here. I can see it. This is where I'm going to be. And I pulled in through this rocky little series of islands, and I dropped the hook. And then I started saying, how can this be? This doesn't match to my compass, but it looks exactly like where I should be. There's the big rock outcropping. There's the little bay, but the compass headings are all wrong. So I thought, I'm lost. So I ended up upping anchor, sailing towards the north. And as I came out, I was right back where I started at that little horseshoe canyon. Yeah. Anyway, the voyage went on from there. I managed to pull that off and sailed into a place that was, by any measure, I don't know if people had been there or not. I know the Yaghan, obviously, the indigenous people of the region, had likely been in there many times, but I couldn't imagine any modern boat going in there, because I skimmed in with my centerboard up, relying on the scags. The water was about 2 feet deep, and then I came into this bay that was uncharted, and that was at Isla Georgiana and Isla Lennox. And then I came out, not Lennox, but at Georgiana. And so I came out from there and had one of the most remarkable sailing experiences of my life. It was blowing about 20. I was sailing in from the Southern Ocean. I was on the Southern Ocean. The sun was like an orange ball just on the horizon. It was mystical, and
wow.
I don't know how to describe it. It was what I came for. Yes. I ended up pinned in there for another 4 days, and then 2 days later, my voyage came to an abrupt halt.
I've seen pictures of that, so tell us about that moment.
Well, when I left that anchorage after 4 days, that's where I made that bold statement, which may or may not be true, but I've got to believe it's true. Where my boat was anchored, tucked up in this little fjord, I climbed up because I was stuck there, and I could get out of my boat. The water was only 2 feet deep and wade ashore. It was one of the times when I was going to pump water, and I decided I'm going to climb that mountain and really look around and reconnoiter to further up this fjord to see if that's where I could get to for safety, because there was really severe weather coming. So I climbed up there, and that's where I have to believe I walked where no human had ever walked. No one would go there. I don't think anybody had been there, but I may be wrong. It was a really cool feeling.
Nice.
And as I was up there, it dawned on me that if I had fallen there and tumbled down that mountain, nobody would have ever found me.
Right.
And so I gingerly came down and got in my boat and proceeded to head through the Murray Channel and to make Georgiana, Isla Georgiana, and between Isla Clementina and Georgiana. And as I came around, I had that magical sailing moment, and the wind came up, and in kind of a golden sunset, I had to short tack through kelp beds. It was unbelievably cool. And now I've been alone I've been by myself without seeing anyone for 58 days. And so I got into this little fjord and tried to find an anchorage. And there are places where Chilean Centoya or fishing boats have pre-rigged what they call survival lines. And there was one across this fjord, and I couldn't cross it. I couldn't sail across that line. That was about a 2-inch thick polypro line covered in kelp and shells. But it's a line that they will, in desperate weather, they will drive their fishing boats in there, these 40 or 50-foot fishing boats, and grab hold of that line and then put the boat in reverse and just sit there and wait for the weather to pass.
Right.
So finally I thought, that's what I have to do. So I tied up to that line about 30 yards or so from shore, and I spent, not to be dramatic, but probably the wildest, hair-raising 4 days of my life.
Wow.
Like a yo-yo on the end of a string.
Right.
Unbelievable. I filmed it. It was wild.
Yes.
And on the fourth day, I realized that since I was inside the tent, if my boat capsized, and it came so close so many times, I even tried back anchoring and finally cut that loose, but if I capsized upside down in the tent, I'd have to cut my way out of the tent and dive down through it to get back up. And I got really nervous about that. So I made a decision. I started timing these wild swings my boat was making, and I packed survival gear, my land tent, into 2 dry bags, and those would act as floats. And I was going to time releasing those, hoping that they would make this point of land. And if they did, then I was going to abandon my boat and swim about 300 yards, blowing downwind, hopefully make that point of land, set up camp, and then if my boat capsized, I'd still recover it. If it didn't capsize, I'd swim back out whenever that storm abated. And I finally decided not to do that. It was too dangerous, because if my gear missed the point, I was in trouble. If I missed the point, I was in trouble.
Right.
So then on day 4, I decided that since the wind had now dropped to about 20 knots, gusting into the mid-20s, that I calculated if I could get oars in the water, I could go that 30 yards and just pull the boat up onto this rocky shoreline, winch it up. I had 2 big land screws and rollers, and just get it out of the water.
Okay.
And I hadn't slept in 4 days. That's the way it was. And so I just jammed my gear into the cockpit, my sleeping bag. I said, this is the moment. The wind had dropped that much. And I got oars in the water, and the first oar caught, there was kelp everywhere, caught in kelp. And there I was spinning and blowing out of this fjord. And I got the mizzen up and ended up in a rare situation that spelled the end of my experience there, or the beginning of my experience. And actually, the chapter that ended there started a new chapter that is more remarkable than my trip. So what happened is I spun out of control, and I started searching for anywhere to get an anchor down. I ended up blowing nearly onto a lee shore, and I got in the water and hauled my boat about 150 yards up to a point and set an anchor and, got back aboard, and then got blown out between Georgiana and Clementina, and the wind dropped to 0. It went from gusting over 35 knots to 0. And then I said to myself, now I'm really in trouble, because I know the patterns. When that happens, the next thing that's going to happen is going to be off the charts. So I started, I had my anchor down, I started yanking my anchor up, and it came up with this like Christmas tree of kelp, and I pulled out my knife and started hacking at the kelp. I stabbed myself in the palm of my left hand. So now I'm duct taping my hand and rowing for my life to find any little crevice I could get my boat into, because I knew that at any moment something was going to happen that I wouldn't be able to handle in the open water. And I was correct. I was absolutely correct. What I didn't know is that some 12 hours before that, the Armada had sent out an emergency notification to all shipping on the Strait of Magellan and in Tierra del Fuego. So in Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, on both arms of the channel and south to Cape Horn, that there was a maritime event happening and shutting down all shipping, as in seek shelter immediately. And so at the same time, an American yacht was driven ashore way north of me, and a French yacht was sunk off the west coast in the same event. I managed to get an anchor down in a bay off of Georgiana in about 60 feet of water, and then it happened.
Yeah.
And it happened, I'll stop this long explanation. I'll sum this up quickly. I looked south towards Isla Basket, and I went, oh my God, there's a ship. There's a white ship. I couldn't believe it. And Isla Basket, at that point, I think is about 5 nautical miles away. And I thought, how in the world could there be a ship? I haven't seen anybody anywhere. Well, it wasn't a ship. It was a water spout.
Right.
That I just, and as it got bigger, larger, I all of a sudden realized, oh my God, that's a water spout. And so I immediately started tying my rig down as tight as I could. I went through the agony of, do I clip in with my harness? Do I stay unclipped? What happens if I go upside down? You know, I clipped, I unclipped, I clipped, I unclipped. I was very unsure what to do at that moment. And then in the matter of about, so I was filming this, and then in the matter of about 15 or 30 minutes, these things started ripping across the water. I lost count at about 40 of these water spouts that had long tails that were just racing around. These vortexes spinning off of this bowl that I was anchored off of, which is never the place to anchor. You always want to anchor where there's flat land and no protection, because these bowls make these vortexes. And I watched one of these come by my boat and pick up what I only can refer to as like giant sections of wet cardboard the size of a car, and just pulling them up in the air. All this kelp going up in the air, sucked up into this thing, and I was sort of mesmerized by this, transfixed. And then all of a sudden, wham, one hit my boat from the port side, and before I could even react or think, my boat was upside down and my head was in the footwell. And I had to remove my life jacket, as I'd always do, to get out from under the coaming. Got up on the bottom of the boat, righted it, got back inside, started sorting gear frantically, and I was hit from the starboard side by another one. And when these things hit, you can't breathe. Everything goes white. There's no land visible. It was sort of a sunny, partly cloudy day, but these things, this second one that hit me again, it took my breath away. The boat capsized to starboard. I climbed up on the hull and righted it, got back on board, and again was like grabbing gear and kind of staying low and holding onto the coaming. And at that point, I unclipped my harness because I had to grab stuff off the back and work on the mizzen. And I looked up, and one came directly from forward, and it blew me off the boat. That's all I can say.
Right.
And so I landed in the water, and I fortunately came up with one seat cushion and my ditch bag, which I'd opened, started stuffing, survival gear in it. But it was open, and I made my way to shore. It took me about 30 minutes or 20 minutes. So when I got to shore, I was so cold, I had a difficult time. And I did manage, because my DeLorme was around my inReach was around my neck.
Okay.
And so I had that. And because I'd been without sunlight for a number of days, I had 15% charge on my DeLorme.
Right.
And so I had to make a decision. do I just hang out here? Because now my boat is upside down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, it's on its side.
It made it to the beach.
Yeah, it's about a quarter of a mile away. So
Yeah.
I thought, well, I've got 45 days of food left.
Yeah.
If I can manage to survive here, I can swim back out to the boat when this is over. And this is hailing. Like hail is coming. It's blowing sideways. The wind was, the base wind was, the Armada later said the base wind was 70 knots. And they had clocked 108 knots over the deck of the ship that eventually managed to pick me up. And so I didn't know that, but I knew it was extreme.
Mm-hmm.
It was in scrub bush, no trees, nothing, not a rock, nothing to hide behind. And so I started digging a hole. And so I made a decision right then. What do I do? If my DeLorme goes black, it's going to be a show. They're going to send ships and planes, and I don't want to do that.
You pressed emergency.
Yeah, for the first time in my life, I made a decision and I know it sounds kind of weird, but this was beyond just me.
Of course.
I didn't want, so I hit the SOS.
Yeah.
I hit it, and it, so then the most bizarre exchange happened between me and DeLorme. I don't even know where the headquarters was. It was in Maine or somewhere in the U.S., and the message went out because your device goes black. It counts down. You've got 1 minute to change your mind. It goes black.
Okay.
And that the message came back, are you shipwrecked? But I was so cold at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and my laptop was duct taped up. I couldn't hit the little toggle. I couldn't type. So then the message came back, are you able to communicate? Just push Y or N. So I pushed N. Are you injured? I pushed N. And then finally they said, don't worry, the Armada will be there in 1 hour. But I knew that wasn't true.
That
couldn't be true.
Right.
Cannot be true.
Right.
So as it turned out, Armada Search and Rescue and Valparaiso got the message from InReach, and a number of things happened. And they finally came back and said, our mistake, hang on as long as you can. It may be days. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, the ship that happened to be nearby, they were about 10 or 15 miles away, circling for their own safety, because it was a Chilean Armada gunboat, 400-foot kind of mini destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
They were in trouble, and so when the winds finally abated, they were able to begin searching, and finally, and I had my flare gun with 3 flares left, because I fired a few when I first got there, just because I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I managed to alert them, and they were in a rib, a black rib. I could see this little dot on the horizon going away from me. So I fired the gun, and they happened to see it. And they had come with 2 scuba divers and a medic. They were actually, and luckily I recorded all this later. They came looking for my body, but I was fine. I managed to crawl down on the beach, got in their rib, and left my boat.
Yeah,
and I asked them, can you salvage my boat? And they said, we can't. We have to get out of here. Things are deteriorating.
Right.
And that's when my real voyage started. I did have an experience with the Armada and with people. A week later, I had my boat, but against complete odds. There was a pirate thing involved. There was money. There was all this weird stuff that happened, and I never gave up.
We need a movie.
And it's all true. The cool thing is, it all happened, and you couldn't make it up.
And I do know you've recorded a lot of videos, but it never got to a point where you could publish a movie, a documentary, right?
Well, I did, I learned from every person I sail with or boat build with, and I learn from every experience I have on the water, every single one. That's kind of the way I do it, is to gather information and become a better person. And I have to say, on this particular voyage, I made one big error, and that was aligning myself with or accepting the offer of a film studio before the trip to make a documentary about my trip to Greenland. And then when it was back to Tierra del Fuego, they got more excited, and they actually filmed the building of the boat, and it was a really weird relationship. They came to Chile with a film crew when John Welsford and I were there, and we finally, John and I, he's one of my very best friends. We got together and finally said, these people have to go. And we informed them, you need to leave. And so John took over filming, and we put a paper in front of them, in front of the director, and said, you're gone, but all the film footage, because I had a contract with them that said that all the film gear they put on my boat, I would own. And it was not that much, like $5,000 for the stuff. I didn't want to be responsible for it. But I also, in that contract, agreed that I would never make one penny from their efforts, because even though they offered 50%, or if it ever made a profit, I said, I don't do this for money. I don't want anything. I don't want the pressure. And so in the end, the last thing I asked for was that if something happened, either I didn't make it, that John would end up owning all the film footage. If I did make it and something happened between us and the film company, film studio, I would own all the footage. So I own John and I technically own all the footage. Amazing. And I just haven't had the heart to, I've never looked at all of it to turn it into a documentary.
We need a filmmaker that's got money to put this as a documentary. I've heard about this filming, and I know a lot of us would support it, and if you don't want to make money, maybe for a cause or something, it would really be worth it.
I would just give it to a reputable person. One of the main things, the first red flag I found with the film company is they said, you'll sign a contract that says you won't make any money from the film. And I said, yes. And they said, well, that's amazing. Thank you. And we'll give you complete editorial control over the content. And I thought, what? I didn't understand that. And so I said to the director or producer, I said, how can that be ethical? A documentary is supposed to tell the raw truth. That was, so I learned a lot. Right. Yeah. So if anybody ever made a film, they can make the film they want with the footage I have.
Right. Yeah. Let's make sure we don't lose that. And tell us, since then, what's the next step in your life after that? I know you still continue in the SCAMP world. You've had workshops. I think you do it in Japan as well. You've built a lot of boats in Japan as well. What are you up to since then?
Well, I now live in Japan. I own a home in Michigan, but I live I'm sitting right now in a boat shop overlooking the ocean on the island of Nakanoshima in the Oki Island UNESCO Global Geopark, which is off the west coast of Japan, between Japan and Korea in Shimane Prefecture. And to get here, there's no airport. I have to take a trip by ship. And I was brought here. The local government asked me, what do you want to do? I said, well, I love to build boats. So they set me up in a boat shop. I wrote a grant with the Nippon Foundation. And I teach people woodworking skills. And I've built several custom SCAMPs here, 2 of them. And a canoe of my design and other boats. And I serve the people, the 2,200 people of this remote island. I've rebuilt 2 traditional Japanese kankos, which are workboats germane. The design is germane to this island. And these boats were basically abandoned. There are 13 of them. They were basically put away and abandoned 75 or so years ago. Okay. And when I first came here, I discovered these unique boats, because now the fishermen use fiberglass boats with diesels or outboard. And I was fascinated by these things. And so I asked the government, I said, who owns these? Well, people own them, but some of the older men have died and they're just going to rot. And I said, would you have an interest in me rebuilding one? Well, sure. So then 3 boats were donated to my little boat shop. And 4 years ago, I'm in my 4th year now here, I rebuilt 2 of them. And I proposed that there should be classes taught by, because when I was rebuilding the first one, all of these very old men would come and, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And they started telling stories and talking to each other about their experiences as boys going offshore with a single oar and sculling and fishing. And it became apparent to me that I was breathing some life back into these older men. And then women came. And so I proposed to the local government that we should hold a regatta where these older men, and some of them are in their 80s, early 90s, could actually show off their skills and take kids out. So this coming week, next Tuesday, is the 4th annual All-Island Conco Regatta. And I was just at the committee meeting 4 nights ago, and there are about 50 competitors lined up now. We do match racing. It's a big event. They put up tents and they have snacks and awards, and the requirements are that you have to have your blood pressure taken beforehand to make sure you're not going to drop dead.
Right.
But this is a community event now, and I've finally made a little difference, and
nice.
It feels great.
That's amazing.
I probably bored you to tears by now.
No, he's the best. I'm just, you should see me smiling. I'm just really enjoying your story. So, yeah, it's because I've read and I followed it. I followed you online while this was happening. So it's nice to get your perspective. You guys, anyway, so it's really wonderful to hear your story. You're a great storyteller. So
I would like to say one thing about my solo endeavors. I've also done some mountain climbing in a previous chapter of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say about solo sailing, to me, solo sailing is, maybe for some people, it's about being solo, but I stand on the shoulders of all the friends who helped me build my boat or built the crate or supported me along the way. To this day, I don't want to be tagged as a selfish solo sailor. I give credit not to myself, but all the friends who supported me and maybe are inspired by the little things I've done.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's all about them. It's not about me.
Yeah, it's about growth and what you've done. You grow on top of that, and everybody grows with that. So
yes, and I know that, as I mentioned before you started recording, as Thoreau said, not to wax philosophical, but I believe it's true that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, and that's so true. So many people are kind of pushed down by jobs and cubicles, or they live in conditions they think they can't get out of. And I respect all people, and I know everyone has challenges. There's no perfect life, but I really want to say that if anyone listening to this is inspired, just go out, look in the newspaper, and buy a little rowboat or get anything, because the peace and the feeling of solitude and satisfaction, or the smiles you might get from your kids, if you just go on the local pond, the water, what is the earth covered by? 78.1 or 9% of water?
Correct.
That's the last true wilderness. The commons of the water is a place to really grow. There you go.
You speak my religion. I couldn't have said it better. So
yes, you could have.
That's exactly what I appreciate. That's the reason for this podcast, is to get people out, listen to it, and get inspired to do solo voyages. That doesn't have to be solo. Just voyage. Get out of the... No. It doesn't have to be solo, out of the house. And
it can be
in nature. Be in nature, really.
$50 aluminum beat-up rowboat. Just the fact that you're on the water and that interface between the water and air. And it's a way to get away from social media and cell phones and the kind of weird world we live in. I really hope that even one person listening to you, I admire what you do.
Thank you.
It is inspired enough, and actually takes action and pulls open the classifieds in the paper and finds that little rowboat or that little kayak or that little stand-up paddleboard, whatever it is.
Do you have any other dreams or journeys you're thinking about, or this is...
Yes. I'm currently still planning. Well, one thing I've learned is it's probably, after my last experience with the film thing, is better not to say anything. Just go do it. But I have a voyage underway. It'll be something for me.
Nice.
My friend John Welsford's going to, again, join me in the run-up for it.
Wow. Looking
hopefully
forward to
next year, next summer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a long-held dream. And it kind of makes... Yeah, it's a good one. And it's going to be in my scamp again.
Okay. I was going to say, is it a scamp or polywog now, maybe? Who knows?
No, it's going to be in an ocean passage scamp.
Wow. That's exciting. Anything else you want to share with our listeners? It's been fantastic for your stories, and I look forward to hear more of your adventures, and maybe we'll have you back for some of that.
Before we go, there is one little thing that I'd like to say.
Absolutely.
I mentioned that my true voyage in the scamp took place in 2 distinct chapters, one of which was day 1 through day 62, and the Tromba Marinas,
right.
The cyclone field that I ran into that was new to me. I'd never experienced that. Few people have.
Right.
Yeah, very few people have. And the way that I was treated by the Armada, brought back to Punta Arenas and Captain's Tea, I wasn't like a victim. They were astonished by what I had done in a very positive way. But the true chapter, the most interesting to me, was what happened from that day forward. That is really bizarre in so many ways. And I'm not putting myself in the league with the next name that I'm going to mention in any way, shape, or form. But this is a really serendipitous, strange twist of what happened to me. And I'll end here, and this might intrigue some people. But Ernest Shackleton set out from Punta Arenas for the ice. And for example, where I launched my boat is the only place in Punta Arenas where Shackleton could launch and test the James Caird, the Dudley Dix, and the Stancomb Wills, the little estuary. And when I returned to Punta Arenas to a future where my boat was gone, it was hundreds of miles away, and there was no chance to rescue it. The actual planning that I ended up doing for the rescue took place in the very building where Shackleton planned the rescue of his men from Elephant Island. He was on the second floor. I was now part of it was in a cafe downstairs.
Wow.
But that's really bizarre to me.
Wow.
Because in Punta Arenas, there are buildings that have Shackleton did this here, and Robert Falcon Scott mailed his last letters from here. But actually, that's a very strange thing.
It is.
He rescued his men.
Yeah.
I rescued my boat, and the Chilean Armada was involved in both of those. And I'm not putting myself in his league in any way, shape, or form. It's just a bit of serendipity that I think is remarkable.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your stories and your wisdom. So
you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.
I told you this would be pretty hairy stories. What an amazing individual. So for our next episode, we have Serge Testa. Probably more known as Serge Testa, but he's born in France, so I'm calling him Serge. Serge still holds the record for going around the world in the smallest boat, less than 12 feet. Very interesting fellow. And now for my announcement. So I've finally set up a Patreon page for nano cruising. Now, before you think this is some sort of art sale, it's not. The podcast would always remain free, and your support, just by listening, sharing, and writing in, means the world already. But if you would like to help keep nano cruising afloat, literally, you can now chip in a little through Patreon. The funds go straight towards covering the monthly cost of keeping everything running, things like podcast hosting platform fees, the website, the mailing list, and slowly upgrading the beer a bit just to make the audio and production even better. Now, there are a few tiers with some benefits at each level, things like behind the scenes, extras, early access, and joining a small boat supporter circle. There's even a level with the t-shirt if you want one. I don't even have one yet. And honestly, if by some miracle nano cruising ever makes more than it costs to run, you can rest assured I'll just convert it into marine plywood and epoxy. So if you want to check it out, the links in the show notes or on the website. No pressure at all. This podcast exists because of people like you out there dreaming, building, and sailing small boats. Thanks as always for being part of this journey, and seize your own adventure.